into some of the blade prep before you actually going to file your knife out. You're going to go back to your little file that I had, or however you want to sand. Doesn't matter to me. I've got 220 grit on this, and I've got the blade already in my vise. And what we're going to do is we're going to smooth this top out enough that we can get a good line on it, so we know where the center of the blade's going to be. And basically all I'm doing is taking that 220 and I'm just coming across the top of the knife. You can sand this as far as you want, but remember you're getting ready to do a whole lot of filing. But basically you're just getting this till you can see your lines. And depending on if you want to put a false edge on it or not, you're going to do the top. I will probably put a false edge on this one just because I like the way they look. So we're going to do at least the upper front half of the blade. You want to try to get this pretty smooth so it doesn't have any big deep gouges that you're just going to have to file out later. Okay, now we got it pretty smooth on this part and on this part. Like I said, I didn't need it to be mirror polished or anything. It just needed to be clean enough that we can see the lines. Okay, got the blade out of the vise. You can still see the line that we did for the handles. That's where your handles are actually going to come up to. You've already drilled your handles. They're about ready. Now we got to get into actually making the blade the way it's supposed to be. Now, the same thing, you want to get your little dividers. Mine are sharpened on both ends, nice and sharp. And you want to try to find the center of the knife. Okay, now that's the center. Now you want to move out just a little bit. You don't want to get it too thin because you're gonna bend it a whole lot. You're gonna have to be a lot more careful on one side than you are the other. But I like to have an edge that's about 20 thousandths thick, somewhere around 1/32. I think that's pretty close. Let's see, 1/32 is 0.0312. That's pretty close. That's going to be a good edge to be able to do things with. So what I usually do, I like to leave just a little bit that's not sharpened, so we can put a little hole in the choil so we can sharpen it all the way back. If you bring it all the way to that and you don't have something there, you can't sharpen it all the way back. So I usually just use a finger thickness or something, and you're just going to scribe those lines all the way up the knife. Make sure that they're good and deep when you're doing it. And then turn it over. Do the same thing if you want to put a false edge. If you don't do this part here. If you want a false edge on it, then I'll show you how to file that in, which is pretty easy. Then go ahead and do that same thing about half to a quarter, depending on how long you want to make it. I'm going about half the blade, and you want to do the same thing. And basically you can kind of see the line that I scribed all the way up and on the top, and that's the basic setup to be able to start file working your blade in. Okay, this is the first little steps of filing your blade. I used to have a kind of a contraption that I would put my knives down in, but I don't think I have it anymore, but this is the way I actually started. I've got a good solid piece of oak clamped into my vise, and I got my knife clamped down with a C-clamp. If you use a piece of wood, you can actually run a screw down here and here, and I may have to do that if it starts moving on me. But the first thing you want to do is transfer that line, that scribed line, to the top of the knife so you know where to go to. And that's, I've lined them up from the bottom till I'm going to make a permanent line right across. That way I know, hey, that's the beginning of the knife. And from there, you're basically just going to start filing it with whatever files you want to do. You're going to start at the tip and work in. However deep you want to make that knife, however far you want to bring it up. I wouldn't go all the way across if I was really wanting to do it. So take your dividers again and figure out on how high you want to make that up here. That looks about right. And you're just going to lightly scribe a line down through there. And now I've got a line up through here, and if you want to mark it, just mark it down through there. And that's the basic shape outline of the knife. And there's no real right or wrong way on how to start. You're just going to bring your file down into this line and then try to move it all the way up to that, and then we're going to have to try to match them up on both sides. That's the reason I say to use some calipers. I'll keep this same size, I'll do it on the other side, and we'll move from there. Okay, we're going to start filing. You got your lines already painted on here with your Sharpie. And what I would suggest is starting pretty close to your line and kind of cutting in pretty deep right in here. And working that shoulder down. Once you start working that shoulder down and you get it close to your line, then you can start moving in, and you'll always have a kind of a high spot to hit. Okay, I've been filing a while. I've got it pretty much down to this first line. After you get there, you're pretty much just going to start working yourself back toward the back until the whole file starts hitting across the line that you want. It's going to take a long time. Your elbows are going to hurt really bad, but you don't have to do it all at one time. Just kind of just keep at it until you get it. And it may take you a couple of days to do this. I also may have to trade out some files. I don't have files enough to do this anymore, but I'll keep at this for a little while till I can at least get part of this side done, and then we'll probably pick it up again. Okay, one thing that you're going to want to check after you feel like you've got halfway done with one side, I've got my line pretty straight up through here. As your tip constantly progress down, all the way down towards your line. I'm touching the line at the tip, that's good. We'll come back to the top in a little while. The next one is your line that you'd scribed on your top. Okay, you want to make sure that you filed all the way down to your line, because otherwise your blade's just going to be way too thick when you get done. So now that I've got this side almost finished, you're going to wind up having to come back to it to even things up, I'll guarantee, because that's just the way it goes. You might get too far into one side or something, so you may have to come back. So I've got this one pretty well already rough done in. So we're going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Now the hard part for even people who've been doing it for years and years is that one side or another you pretty much do right-handed. The other side you have to kind of get used to doing it almost left-handed, because you're going to have the knife in a whole different position coming at it at another angle. Some people may find one side easier than the other. It's the key is to just keep working until you get them both even the best you can. So we're going to flip this over and we'll start again. Okay, on the same thing on this side, you want to transfer your line, but now you've got a little bit of something to go by because you can see where you filed on the other side. So you're just going to mark that to know where to go to. All the way up. Now you had your calipers that you used yesterday to set your line across there. Same thing, come to the edge where you're going to start. Just kind of run that down. Make your mark. Then I'm going to go through and just give myself a guideline. And that will be where I file to. Alright, we're going to check it now that I've got through both sides and see on how even our tops are compared to our grinds or our foul lines. No, they're pretty close, so we're probably good there. Now we got to check the edge. Now all the way through the edge I'm doing pretty good. The tip is about right where I want it. I know it looks a little thick on the top here. We're going to fix that in just a second. But on the inside, on the side that I'd already done, on this side, I'm going to have to go back and take a little bit more off of this side. So we'll re-screw it down, take a little bit more off this side because it's a little it's not all the way down the line. It's going to be a little too thick at the edge. So we've got to come in just a little bit. Other than that, my lines are pretty close to the same size. And I'll show you on how to make sure that that lines up and on how you can sharpen it all the way back. Got both sides filed out. Your edge is pretty even all the way up and down. That's what we're looking for. This is something some people put in their knives, some people don't. but I like to put this in my knives because I can't sharpen things all the way down to the end on a stone or on a grinder or on anything if I don't have the cut in this blade. So you can use what size you want. I like to use an 1/8 inch most of the time for this. So basically you're just going to go back to your where your grind started on both sides of your file things for the blade, and then you're just going to make a cut down into the blade. And that's really all there is to that. You're just going to cut that down into that, and now when you go to sharpen it, you're going to be able to sharpen all the way back to here instead of worrying about hitting up on the knife and then making that big V or anything like that. Now you can get all the way back to it. The next thing you've got to do is you're going to have to sand that. Of course, it's harder to get into it because now you've got a kind of an 1/8 inch something to set it on. I just have a whole bunch of little screwdrivers and things like that laying around. So I use that or a needle file that I just come in and I'm just going to sand that. No reason you're spending this much time on an eye to leave something unsanded and ugly. So just come in and sand that. Doesn't take much. I actually think the piece of paper I picked up is 600 grit. Now you're going to have to come out and sand this again after you heat treat, but that's just this cut right here, and that's really all there is to that.